on. Good morning. Okay. That was stupid. Let's see. Stack of stuff. Come on. Baby. May. Come on. Agenda. Come on. I will have it right, I think, now. Come on. Where's it? All right, so ready to go. Of course, first order of business is the general statute 138A-15 requires me to inquire as to whether any member knows of any known conflict of interest or appearance of conflict with respect to any matter before the committee today. If any member does know of such a conflict or appearance of a conflict, please so state at this time. Seeing and hearing none, we'll conclude that that's taken care of. If anybody does turn something up as we get farther in the agenda, of course, just speak up. Second is approval of the minutes from the committee meeting on March 12. Have folks had a chance to review those and ready to proceed on them? Any comments on the meeting minutes? I don't have them up. Yes, Vice Chair.
I have a question about the attendance, because I was not marked as present, and I just wanted to clarify.
Well, that should be corrected for sure. Well, hang on. Were you here in March?
Yeah, I'm going to have to check on the dates. I think it was the last meeting I was present. I missed one meeting, so I'm going to have to
I thought. Okay, I thought you were not here too, I guess, is the way the directors are reacting. I think do you? All right. Well, okay, all right. That's probably the best thing. We'll just hold that and we can take care of that at the next meeting then, if there's a question there. So we got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 6, but not showing you. Okay. Then let's move to the pre-permitting draft rules. Let me explain a little bit about the situation on that. You know, we went round and round last time. And we know, as identified by Commissioner Smith, that we've got a potential issue here because of the detailed specification in the general statutes and the proscription in the Administrative Procedure Act from simply adopting language straight out of the general statutes into a rule. So we know we got a problem there. So we're trying to figure out exactly how to deal with that. The staff has put together something I think is a good shot at it, but we don't know for sure is the short answer. And well, I'll just go ahead and report on. Our counsel is consulting with the staff for the Rules Review Commission, which is where this will be an issue. She's trying to get an early review of this language before our July meetings. See if we can get a sign either way with whether they're going to have a problem with it or they think it can pass muster. So what I'd like to do today is simply go ahead and move this language forward. If anybody's got any questions about it or wants to bring up anything, that's fine. I'm not trying to cut off any discussion, but I don't expect to do a detailed review and revision today. That we'll get a read from the RRC, and if there's a need for some changes in order to get RRC approval, we'll deal with them in July. And my plan, as I said, is to go ahead and approve this draft rule from the committee and have it available to the full commission in July. And if there are changes needed from the RRC consultation, we'd plan to do that at the full commission, unless Chair Solomon tells me that's a bad idea. Okay, so I think we're good there. The one thing I do know is that Commissioner Smith said that she had some questions that she would like to raise, not about the language, but I think the RIA.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. RIA.
Oh, let me do one other thing real quick. I completely forgot. I should have mentioned Commissioner Bailey will not be with us either today or tomorrow. So she is currently in France and enjoying a vacation. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, let's bring Joelle on up too, because you're probably going to be the best one to answer Commissioner Smith's questions. Thank you. Who too?
All right. Thank you.
I'm sorry. All right, I'll tell you what, yeah, go ahead with your presentation.
Okay.
Although I don't know, it needs to be very lengthy. I think, as I said, the main thing that I'm aware of at this point is Commissioner Smith's questions about the RIA.
Okay, I'll
But
try to
Go right ahead.
I'll try to keep it brief then. Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you. I'm Joelle Burleson with the Division of Air Quality's Planning Section. And this is a topic that, as the Chair noted, you're already familiar with. I'm here to present to you draft rules to incorporate the pre-permitting construction provisions of Session Law 2023-134. And our second slide here is just a series of acronyms for your reference or public's reference. As you know, we came back in October of 2023, Session Law 2023-134 went into effect, and it modified the air permitting provisions of General Statute 143-215.108A relative to construction of new facilities and modifications of existing facilities. North Carolina's air permitting procedures would be modified by allowing for the construction of sources prior to receipt of an air permit upon a determination that an administratively complete application has been submitted to the DAQ. And the language of the session law also lists several exclusions from the ability to use this particular procedure. In May of 2024, Governor Cooper signed into effect some technical corrections bill to the State Budget Act, which included which was designated Session Law 2024-1, and it included Section 4.13A, which added 2 new paragraphs to the Session Law 2023-134 and Section 12.11F and G. Those paragraphs established a July 1, 2025 deadline for submittal of a SIP or state implementation plan to EPA for approval that reflects these statutory changes, and established the effective date of the revision to be contingent upon EPA approval of these provisions into the SIP. The session law included provisions specifying particular activities that could be undertaken prior to receiving a permit. And they include in GS 143-215-108A, B1 through 4, clearing and grading, construction of access roads, driveways, and parking lots, construction and installation of underground pipe work, including water, sewer, electric, and telecommunications utilities, and construction of ancillary structures such as fences and office buildings that aren't a necessary component of an air contaminant source equipment or associated air cleaning device for which a permit is required. Related to this, but not part of today's package, for rulemaking was an action you took last month, at your last meeting in March, and that was where you adopted in the Section 1211C provisions of 2023-134 into the permitting definitions and timelines rulemaking, and you adopted the term administratively completes language to mean that all information required by statute, regulation, and application form has been submitted to the department for the purposes of processing a permit application. That definition is incorporated in, I believe it's 2Q0301 or 3, definition 1. That was approved by the Rules Review Commission at its April meeting. For today's rulemaking, the relationship is that the determination that an application is administratively complete is also the point in the permitting process at which an applicant could begin construction under today's revisions under the statute. The session law excludes sources that are subject to permit limits set pursuant to PSD or Prevention of Significant Deterioration or Non-Attainment New Source Review Program, residual risk-based hazardous air pollutant standards set subject to Section 112F of the Clean Air Act, and case-by-case MACT standards issued by the division pursuant to Section 112J of the Clean Air Act. We don't expect that many sources will be subject to the exclusions, and thus the majority of sources would be able to take advantage of this ability to construct upon an administratively complete permit being determined. In the, as mentioned before, Session Law 2024-1 requires the department to submit to EPA a SIP revision for approval as a step to effectuate these changes. And DAQ is here today to provide these draft rules in order to incorporate the new expanded allowances into subchapter 02Q. And we would then submit these rule changes to EPA for incorporation into the state's SIP in order to enact the provisions. Those provisions, according to 2024-1, would not become effective until the first day of a month, that is 60 days after the DEQ secretary certifies to the reviser of statutes that the EPA has approved the amendment based on these statutory revisions into North Carolina's SIP. As noted back in March, the EMC revisions adopting the permit timeline definitions reflect the meaning of administratively complete. Per the statutory requirements, those rules also have an effective date that's contingent upon approval into the SIP. Rather than not allowing construction until permit issuance, the proposed pre-permitting construction rule changes before you today would allow construction to begin at the time the application is determined to be administratively complete. The proposed package before you includes 3 rules. One new rule proposed for adoption, 15A NCAC 02Q 0114, and 2 existing rules that are proposed for amendment, and they are 15A NCAC 02Q 0501 and 0507, which are essentially amended for cross-referencing the new rule. 2Q 0114 will implement the pre-permitting construction provisions, and as proposed, it allows the applicant to begin construction but not operation of an air contaminant source, equipment, or associated air cleaning device before the permit is issued, provided the application is deemed administratively complete, and the allowance does not apply if the source is subject to permits limits established under PSD non-attainment new source review, residual risk-based HAP standards under Section 112F, or case-by-case permit requirements under Section 112J that are issued by the Division of Air Quality. And specifically, 0501 is being amended in paragraph B and C to add the cross-reference, and 507 is being amended in paragraph A to add a cross-reference to 2Q 0114. In terms of the regulatory impact analysis, a qualitative approach was taken to describe potential impacts. And because of the nature of the proposed changes, there's really no definitive financial impact identified, as the variables are market dependent and uncertain. And the nature of the types of permit applications we would receive would be case by case and site specific. So it'd be difficult to quantify any uniform quantitative assessment. So as a result, we characterize the potential impacts to the regulated community, and we anticipate that this rulemaking will only have potential implications for applicants of new permits and modifications to permits. For construction and modification applications processed under the currently effective permitting timelines, which are not the ones you adopted last month, but or in March, but what's already on the books that serves as our baseline. For non-Title V construction and modification, an applicant could theoretically, if they had all their ducks in a row, begin construction as much as 90 days, processing days earlier than waiting until permit issuance. For those using the Title V's one-step initial permit process for significant modifications, the applicant could potentially opt to begin construction as much as 18 months earlier than waiting until permit issuance. And then for the Title V two-step initial applications and significant modifications, an applicant would theoretically be able to begin construction as much as 90 processing days earlier than waiting for permit issuance, because the first step of this two-step process is essentially the non-Title V construction permitting process. So from our perspective, the most likely benefit resulting from this rulemaking is flexibility for a private sector applicant to choose to begin to construct upon the application being deemed administratively complete instead of waiting till the end of the timeline when the permit is issued. And this could result in potential savings in their overall project completion Applicants would have this flexibility to choose to construct in parallel with the technical analysis and review of the permit application. And so that could result in an earlier completion date of their construction phase. Although that the pre-permitting construction provisions don't allow actual operation of the new or modified source any sooner than current requirements, a project that completes construction earlier could, in theory, begin operation earlier if all other aspects of their project are in order to allow that. So despite these possible impacts, we do not have a anticipated quantifiable change in cost or savings to the regulated community. To the extent that there are any local governments who might engage in construction of a project, they would experience the same type of relief that the private sector regulated community would. If a construction project were to result in additional jobs in an area, then faster construction allows that project to start sooner, begin operating sooner, then those associated jobs might be available sooner than they otherwise would. However, we did not quantify costs or benefits to the general public identified to occur as a result of this rulemaking. So it's important to note that the emission standards and requirements that a facility must meet to receive a permit from DAQ do not change as part of this proposal. Section 4.13 of Session Law 24-1 requires that the review and approval of air permitting procedure changes by the EPA for this rulemaking in order for it to be fully implemented, and that ensures that standards for air quality permitting will be maintained. The permit review process still has to adhere to all the requirements for North Carolina SIP and federal and state requirements for fair facility air pollutant emissions. And for these reasons, the quality of DAQ's review is not anticipated to be diminished because an applicant opts at his or her own risk to construct prior to final permit issuance. So as a result, we did not identify any additional impacts to the environment or public health to be expected to occur as a result of these rule changes. And because the DAQ's permit review process won't change, the regulatory impact analysis anticipates that there are no impacts to the state from this rulemaking. There are several uncertainties associated with the RIA, including when EPA might approve the pre-permitting construction provisions of the proposed rules into the SIP. And that's somewhat inherent in the language of Session Law 2024-1 that makes the effective date of the provisions contingent upon EPA approval into the SIP. And as a result of that, it's uncertain when the proposed new and amended rules will actually become effective, be implemented, and when any potential benefits or costs might actually be realized. So with that, note that the RIA was submitted for review by the Office of State Budget and Management and was approved on April 27th of this year. With that, the director recommends that the committee approve the proposed adoption of 15A NCAC 02Q 0114, the proposed amendments to 15A NCAC 02Q 0501 and 0507, and the accompanying regulatory impact analysis to proceed to the Environmental Management Commission to request approval to proceed to public comment. Should the committee choose to approve that recommendation today, we would be back to request the EMC to proceed to public comment and hearing in July, hold a public comment period and hearing through the summer, be back for adoption in November, and then have the Rules Review Commission approval hopefully in December of this year. The SIP submittal would then be made following that approval, likely in January of 2026. And then when this would actually become effective would lie with when EPA approves the actual amendments into the state implementation plan. With that, I'd just like to say thank you to all the various agency staff who have worked to get this proposal before you today.
Okay, then any questions for Ms. Burleson? And I will recognize Commissioner Smith first, since she's already indicated she has some questions.
So one sort of technical question and a couple of questions about the RIA. The technical question is, how easy is it to determine whether a proposed source or a proposed source modification will meet the emissions standards based on simply having a complete application. So when you've done the screening of the application and you've said, yes, we have a complete application, how much distance is there between that decision, being able to fully predict that that source or that source modification is going to meet the emission standards at the end of the day?
Well, I'd say that's a good question. And I think it would vary from application to application, given the nature of its complexity and the sources and the standards involved. I don't know that that's a timeframe that can be readily defined, but I'm open to hearing otherwise if any of our DIQ leadership feels that that's something that they are able to define.
All right.
I don't have anything to add.
Yeah,
So-
that would be part of that.
It is a difficult question, and it leads directly to my major question about the regulatory impact analysis, which is that it does not talk about that question and the uncertainty for the applicant and the public about moving forward with construction of a source or a source modification without any review other than review for completeness of the application. And you mentioned, and the rules recognize now that the applicant would move forward with construction at their own risk. I think that's worth discussing in this regulatory impact analysis, because really the only uncertainty that's mentioned is the uncertainty of EPA's approval or the timing of EPA's approval. I think there's uncertainty about whether EPA will approve it at all, because the first indication we had last fall was that EPA did not believe this language was consistent with Clean Air Act requirements. And I assume, I missed the September meeting, unfortunately. I assume that was largely inconsistency with overall pre-construction review requirements. May also have been a problem in terms of public notice, because in this scheme, the legislative scheme, there would be no public notice and opportunity to comment until after construction was well underway. But in any event, we know that EPA expressed concern that this change would not be consistent with the Clean Air Act. And I think the regulatory impact analysis needs to say something about the uncertainties concerning approval by EPA, the uncertainty, even if EPA approves it, of risk of third-party citizen suits if in fact EPA approves it, but there is a strong legal argument that in fact it's not consistent with the Clean Air Act, and moving forward under these provisions may well make an applicant vulnerable to a third-party citizen suit. So that whole kind of range of uncertainties and risk, I think, needs to be at least described in the regulatory impact analysis.
Commissioner Ellis.
So a question for Commissioner Smith on, because I'm not an expert on the Clean Air Act, but when does EPA have jurisdiction? Do they have jurisdiction prior to any emissions? They have jurisdiction over the facility before it goes online, but they don't have jurisdiction over a construction project.
Well, I'll refer you to, I think there are EPA rules and based on the Clean Air Act itself that describe circumstances that require pre-construction review of a new source or a source modification. And probably Mr. Abrazinskis can speak in more detail about that, but that is both in the Clean Air Act, it's been in EPA guidance, it's reflected in EPA rules, that if there is a new, in certain categories of sources and source modifications, pre-construction review is required.
Well, I think, let me jump in. If you go to the draft rule, you'll see those, primarily they're addressed in the draft rule for 114, the particular categories, PSD, MACT, and what's the third one I'm forgetting?
PSD.
There was a third one. wasn't there?
Cox
Case
is,
by case and residual risk.
Oh, residual risk. That's right. Okay. Yeah. So those are already set out. I will partially agree with Commissioner Smith. I think there certainly is a question here about this. And EPA, although fundamentally, I thought EPA's letter and back answering director's letter requesting a parallel processing was way overboard, because they claimed at the front end of that letter that it could lead to a violation of standards or a violation of the SIP. Well, no, it couldn't, in fact, because you're only constructing, you're not going to be operating. So those types of violations would occur once you started operating, and that's not what this rule authorizes. Now, there is some language in the EPA SIP rules that raises at least a question about the ability to allow somebody to construct. I think I don't disagree. We're going to have probably some further conversation with EPA at some point. We'll see how they react to this whole thing at some point assuming we're going to have a final rule on this. But I wouldn't suggest it's a slam dunk to get it approved at EPA by any means.
yeah, and my major point at this stage is setting aside the policy decision the legislature made, is that with respect to the regulatory impact analysis, I think we need to at least describe those uncertainties and what those additional risks may be to an applicant who chooses to move forward. Because I think there are some potential risk and costs there. And the RIA just doesn't really discuss that at all.
Is that something y'all can handle? Okay, you think? I mean, I don't think it has to be long-winded, but at least add some discussion of that as Commissioner Smith outlined it.
Yes, sir. I think we can noodle on some language there to address that concern between now and the next meeting.
Yeah, okay, that'd be fine.
That's all.
All right, any other questions, comments, suggestions? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve this rule to go to the commission in July.
So moved.
So moved by Vice Chair Lyerly. Second. No one's willing to second the motion?
So, Mr. Chairman, can we get a clarification on the motion? So are we moving, I assume we usually move the draft rule and the RIA together.
Correct.
But if we're going to have changes to the RIA, is it your intention to come back to the committee
No.
with the changes or move it?
Well, no,
Forward.
it's not, because I don't think they're that substantial. I mean, you discussed it and described it. Director says they can make some changes. I would take it as an RA that's going to be revised somewhat on the way to the full EMC. So, I mean, if something major comes up, we could always pull it back to the committee in July, but I don't think that should be necessary. Commissioner Ellison.
Well, that's my question. If I would suggest modifying the motion pending the committee's approval of the RIA, of the modified RIA.
Well, if we do that, then either we're going to have to extend the EMC consideration to September, or we'd have to do a waiver in July. Those are the choices. If the committee's going to consider it further because of the RIA, then it's not, we won't move it to the full commission. We won't move it out to the full commission today. So that's what it leaves you with. Either it defers the rule on the normal course it would go in September, assuming that we approved it with the modified RIA, or if we approved it with a modified RIA, we could also have a motion to take under advisement motion to suspend the 60-day rule and still go to the full commission in July. Those are the two choices. So whatever the committee wants to do, I mean, I'd rather move it, but if you're not comfortable doing it until the RIA changes are seen, then let's look at it again in July, I guess. Is that where everyone's inclined to go? All right, I guess.
Is the department generally in favor of this rule?
Well, go ahead. Well, at this point, I don't think it's really a question. It's in the session law. We don't have a choice. We don't have a choice. They don't have a choice. So it's whether they like it or don't like it is or we like it or don't like it is pretty much irrelevant. So we've got to take some action one way or another. I mean, I suppose we could turn it down flat, but I think session law invocation that we need to at least move it to the full commission, and I'll leave that to the chair, I think, has a comment.
If Director Abrazinskis thinks, and the department thinks these are more narrative changes to the RA and not substantial changes, I think you could approve it today and move it on over. But I don't want to get caught with a bunch of recalculations and complexity. So it really, y'all prepared the RA and I think feel good about it, but you know, that's really to give this a little time, because it is a session law, give it the time to move it forward. I'd like to see it move forward if y'all feel good about it. If you don't feel good about it, there's a lot of uncertainty. Let's hold it back and either do a 30-day waiver or wait till September to approve.
Go ahead.
Yes, sir. So if I understood correctly, the request was just to kind of beef up the uncertainty section to cover the points that Commissioner Smith made. And we can do that, and it will not change the outcome or the conclusions in any way. I think these are fair requests. However, I mean, there's most certainly uncertainty on the points made, and we can better describe that.
Are there other points that have been raised? So that's the only one is Commissioner
Not that I've
Smith's.
heard. No.
And I too think it's legitimate, but I also think from the standpoint of an RIA, that uncertainty is probably more with who's going to use it and not use it, because it does create problems for people to use it or not use it. I don't know how you would correlate that into a cost to the state or to the private sector that would change the RA itself. It would be like a paragraph, warning paragraph of the uncertainties, not a dollar you could calculate.
I think that's correct. I don't think it would change the bottom line of the regulatory impact analysis, but I think it's important to describe what those uncertainties are. I personally would prefer to have the committee see the new language, and having seen the new language, I suspect there wouldn't be any problem with waiving the 60-day provision and taking it up with the full commission. That obviously is up to everyone on the commission, including people who aren't sitting here today. But I suspect that wouldn't be an enormous issue.
Well, all right, if my vice chair will withdraw his motion,
I'll withdraw my motion.
and we will hold this till July. Let me make one further comment on this, and I think, I don't know if this will alleviate anybody's concern, but what's that? Because I think fairly early in, when we got into this, probably all the way back to last fall, I had asked Director Abrazinskis whether there was anybody really using this language, because as he described it, I think in a previous meeting, the session law language was actually enforced, the original session law. Then it was modified last fall in the budget bill, and that it effectively took it off the books and required some regulatory action. And so my question was, well, when it was in force and people could have used it without having a rule in place, was anybody using it? And I think, as I recall, the answer was y'all had gotten some questions from people about it and basically said you need to go talk to your lawyer, but was not aware of anybody actually using this. So it's, I really wanted to only make this point that I don't think this is going to open some great floodgate, quite honestly, given at least the limited experience that we've had before now. So, all right, well,
So we need to make a motion to carry it over?
no, we'll just leave it. I don't think, it's not a motion if we're going to defer till next meeting.
Let's leave it open agenda item for next meeting.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
That's, and I do want to, let's see, where's my agenda? I don't want to run out of time here for Commissioner Yarborough, who is where? Oh, there he is. Yeah, coming up. I want to get him up to talk about the situation that he's concerned about in western North Carolina with the Helene recovery. And it's listed on here under information. And you need to talk about the recent EPA action, or maybe do it tomorrow, but I want to get him up for sure.
Yeah.
This is information item number 2, air quality permits during emergency.
Their website, I guess. Is
Yeah, their website. Yeah, and we'll get into that just a second. Sure. Thank you for your time. Last meeting, I mentioned about My situation with Western North Carolina, for those that do not know, I've been involved with disaster work across the state and some other states for many decades. I'm an agronomist and a soil scientist. So I kind of have some background there and some credentials to do that with. Well, what my main concern was, and it is, we have permits and then we don't have permits for emergency situations. And to me, that's backwards. I don't understand how we can make that happen. And what it does essentially is make the locals that have the regulatory authority, puts them in a very bad position because they're the ones that have to make that decision. They have mortgages, they have kids in school, they have kids to support. They're not going to sign off on anything unless somebody tells them to up top. And that's where we are right now. So there's two things I'm going to bring up. And fortunately, Richard Rogers, as a director, came up with his crew, and then Sushma and John Nicholson came up, and we had a great discussion with a lot of different permitting agencies about a month ago. I was very encouraged by that because it became apparent to all of them that we're all operating in silos. Everybody thinks that somebody else is doing this. This is my piece, but they don't realize that this is an emergency. So there's two things I wanted to ask. And I don't know that this group can do it, but it's something that's, you've got the smarts here to come out with some ideas. First, I think that when there is a declared emergency, somebody should be able to have a deemed permit or a general permit for the things that they're talking about. Those are things that could be very helpful. And I'll say that because I do have staff as a chair of the Soil and Water District in my county. I had staff that could go out immediately after after a disaster, they could actually do work. They could help people. But because they have no permit, that staff is not. But the local people can do about anything. And then the second thing, and I'm going to get to what I asked Chair Carter about. I'm going to get to this, but the second piece of it, it takes a long time to ever get things together and get money to do work. And then all of a sudden, as people look at you and say, it's not a disaster anymore. That's about the craziest system I've ever seen. And we say that because, oh, it's always federal or something. Well, even FEMA has 5 years. And with a signature, an exception, they can go longer than that. This gets to the point. I had been working on getting permits to do work with the Soil and Water District across Western North Carolina. We have a new machine, high-tech machine to make biochar. And all it is activated charcoal. It's the same thing that you've had in little aquarium filters, or you've had in Brita. You've had anything that's called activated charcoal. That is generally coal-based. What we're talking about with this is we have, and I mentioned this in the last meeting, is we have 800,000 acres of trees down in Western North Carolina. That's not counting what's the debris in the rivers. We have a tremendous amount of opportunity for ridiculous amounts of fire. What can we do with that? Right now, what's happened with it is, generally speaking, is that it's dragged out. It's either chipped up or it's burned in air curtain burners or just on the side of the road or wherever you can burn it. This new machine comes out of Canada. There's only 11 of them. We conned this company that makes it, Tiger Cat, into bringing it. They were going to send one that was purchased to Florida. I told them it's halfway. Bring it to us. Let us try it. Originally, they wanted $1 million up front. Well, I thought, well, everybody says there's millions of dollars out here to help you, billions of dollars. Well, I can tell you one thing. I ain't seen it. Counties hadn't seen it. So the first thing that everybody wants to do, they say, well, we've got money for the feedstock to drag it to you. We can probably get some money out here for the finished product, but we're not going to pay for the equipment nor the operator. Now that is a backwards thing too, as well as it's nothing y'all can do about it, but it's just something I can complain about. And the first thing is to make sure you understand, I have no conflict of interest. I make no money off of this. Put that down on your books, that's for sure. It's not nothing I could, but I wish I could figure out how to make some money off of something besides volunteer work, but that's all right. This is the piece. Somebody told me that I'm gonna have a permit for this new machine from air quality. And I said, you have got to be kidding me. We've got a new machine, high tech. It's making biochar. It's something that's completely different. It's not the air curtain that you see that's blowing smoke up all the time. And we're not making ash. It's going to have to take to the landfill. We're making a finished product that is a high value product that's not available anywhere in the South other than way down in South Georgia. And so that's what the deal is. And I want to, is there a way to show that video? If you'll help me with it. I'll show you what the machine is. Because there's nothing better than to see something. Public's explanation. Yeah, there you go. I saw a little picture there. There you go. You have it where it actually has it operating.
Oh,
This thing is bigger than a tractor trailer. It weighs 83,000 pounds.
Right there.
It can be, yeah, there you go. It can be mobile. This thing can burn anything that has carbon. When I say burn it, I'm talking about pyrolysis. It's basically taking it and making it into activated charcoal, a biological piece. So there's a air curtain in if you want to look at it that way, but this material is made into that charcoal. Anybody that's had a big green egg, that's exactly what that is. It's in bigger chunks. This is it's taken through, it has a water bath in the bottom, and then it's actually run and stored out a conveyor belt. So then you can see it here. This is revolutionary for us because it's actually mobile. We can take this to places where the debris is. Again, it's $1 million. But it's temporary unless I can find the money. And we're getting closer on that. But here's the piece I want to ask you. I did talk to the Director Abrazinkas, and he was very helpful. He said it's Title V and it's part of EPA, that he has no control over having this permit. We don't have to have the permit till September 1. That goes back to the second piece. Okay, we're not going to have an emergency after September 1. That's BS. We're going to have an emergency for 5 to 10 years. Because with 800,000 acres of trees down, there's no way in the world we're going to get anything done. I don't even know if they'll have money by September 1. Again, what I'm asking you is, I don't know if the EMC has any role in this, but I do believe, and Sushma and John Nicholson both, and Sushma talked to me today, they're working on some opportunities here. Get all the permitting people in together. When there's a declared emergency, this is what we're going to do. This is how things are going to work. And I think that would be very helpful. But all I'm asking you on this, if there is something brand new that we have technologically have never seen before, why in the world am I going to have to pay $12,000 for a permit? And I listened to the previous piece there. They're assuming that we can use this thing at 100% of what Tiger Cat actually says it could put out. I doubt very seriously we'll ever get to that point. So we're assuming that, we're the maximum, that's the reason this permit goes to that 35 tons. I think that's what you said, wasn't it, Mike? Because the 35 tons per day or whatever it was, and that would be assuming, I think that was per hour though, wasn't it? 34 tons.
No, sir, 35 tons per day is the threshold above which the new source performance standard federal rule kicks in that requires.
Yeah, and now is that
permitting.
35 tons, is that but debris or is that particulates? Is that, how are you looking at that?
Yes, sir, that's 35 tons per day of feedstock loading
Feedstock.
into the machine.
Okay, what's the alternatives of not doing this?
How much do they typically burn in a day? I think it's more than 35 tons?
Yeah, we can do that, and hopefully that's what'll happen. But on the other side of it, the particulate and the smoke on this is completely different than anything we've ever done. We're not completely burning this product. It's turned into charcoal very quickly, almost Soon as it's thrown into this machine with the temperatures that we have, there's hardly any smoke, hardly any particulates. And that's the purpose of it. We're able to use that carbon source to take it back to the farms, take it back to the landscapes. It's been used for most of the biochar is used actually as activated charcoal in water filtration systems.
Well,
Municipals.
Let me just interject here, I guess, and then pick up on, or follow on Director Representative's comment. At least, well, it sounds like we definitely need to figure out a permitting situation. I'm glad to hear that the management department's working on this, but one thought I had, and that's why I was asking about the 35 tons, if that's typical, more or less what you're burning in a day. One way to avoid the current permitting requirement would be to stay under 35 tons a day.
Yeah.
Then the NSPS is not triggered. Now, that may be somewhat limiting on your operation. I understand that, and that's why I just want to throw that out there. The other thing I was thinking I want to throw into this too is you said we saw the charcoal coming out and up the conveyor. So we're talking about activated carbon, right?
Sure.
Should be?
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly right.
Which unless, Mr. Chair, correct me if I'm not wrong, but that's exactly what we need to a lot of places to filter PFAS out of water, correct?
Absolutely. That's one of the reasons
So
I'm here.
You know, we're generating something that's very much needed these days and might even lower the price, who knows? So,
It also helps with the main thing, I'll give you the example of why I've been trying to work on biochar for 3 decades. It's never penciled out because pulpwood and other products were already there and they had an expense. So it really didn't ever pencil out except for something like water quality, some treatments and that. And I've used it in agriculture settings with pesticides and contaminants, obviously. That was coal-based. The pulp mill at Canton went out. That's a 200-mile radius. We had no place to take pulpwood. The forestry industry contracts went completely to zero. So we started looking at biochar, having another option for pulpwood, which would be this, because then it has no value. This could actually be able to pencil out very effectively. Tropical Storm Fred came. Again, we brought up biochar, couldn't get it funded. But now with 29 counties that have been impacted, we've still have no pulp market, so we have no forestry industry. Where we're having to deal with this, if you're using an air curtain burner that you normally use, you end up with ash. It ends up in the landfill. If we chip it, there's too much chips, there's too much mulch. We can't get rid of it, so it's ending up in the landfill. This has an opportunity to reduce the landfill waste by 90%. If we can do that, then even counties will celebrate the fact that they don't have to go out and look. Their landfills will be able to do it. This technology is going to be incredibly helpful for a lot of reasons. I'll bring up this and I'll shut up for you, but I can still remember the first time I ever saw a hydraulic excavator. Big, huge, clumsy machine, but it was unbelievable what it could do. Expensive. And I thought, well, man, we need they need these things, but nobody's going to pay for them. Now even a lot of mini farms have a track hoe, one of these mini track hoes. I think this is going to be the future for doing a lot of different things. If you're a landscaper, you've got to actually have a machine, not this size, obviously, but something in that kind of mode, landfill space. We can take newspapers, anything you can think of. But all I'm asking you is it's almost, I don't know that I can keep this machine because we're having to pay for it. And that's been a struggle. But if we can, then we have something that can show. But the fact that I've got to find a way to pay $12,000 for a permit on September 1, because, it's not emergency anymore, is just driving me crazy. And I don't know if anybody wants, and I appreciate the fact that we have to have permitting. I'm not trying to get around it. If I was making my own company, I would understand it. But in an emergency, I think we need to look at other things that human need.
let me recognize Chair Solomon.
Yeah, and I've been working with Bill, and Bill's been working with Director Rogers and Director Vincent and some other folks for 6 months on this after Helene. The thing that came with me with all this, when I first Bill started talking, he showed me pictures. I said, wow, that's Hurricane Helene. He goes, no, that's Tropical Storm Fred, several years later. And I think everybody, the department that goes up there looking at Helene is taken aback by how much is still sitting around several years after Fred. And if we keep at the current pace, Helene's stuff's gonna be there, as Bill says, for 10 more years, laying around, not being able to handle it through our landfills and other constructive purposes. I think Bill's really gotten excited about this because it provides a short-term solution to keep things, to expedite things.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of other permitting things we need to solve, as he's talked about, and we've talked about with the different directors, of how do we make all this go faster? Because we are not keeping pace with these natural disasters. Our permitting and our implementation are too clunky right now. And so I think Hurricane or Tropical Storm Fred and now Helene is great demonstration, and Bill's lived it on the front line and been frustrated. But that's his passion now, is to figure out a way to make all of this go a little bit faster.
Yeah.
And not be held down by bureaucracy or money, but to do the right things, but to make it go faster.
Okay.
Yeah, and again, I worked my whole career, and I understand everybody says they want to help, but when it really gets down to who the regulatory people are, they're local. And they can't sign off on anything and risk their careers and risk the issue. So it's going to have to come from the top. You can't sit there and say, well, I'm going to let the people in Asheville, the local people in Haywood make that determination. You can't do that. This is more of informational than anything, but I'd sure appreciate your thoughts and thinking about how can we make this work. I think there's opportunities here. If it's emergency, best example I know, if your house is on fire, you call the fire department. They don't ask for permission to have slips to get on your place. They don't ask for permission to get up on the roof and cut a hole. They don't ask for an asbestos abatement program, and if you have lead paint, they put the dadgum thing out. And then they have that. But why do we have any difference when there's a disaster like a flood? We look at that. There's going to have to be some exceptions made, and they need to have them already in place. Doesn't matter if you're in Brunswick County or Buncombe County. It's the same thing.
Let me recognize Commissioner Smith and then Commissioner Ellison.
So one question for Commissioner Yarborough, and then maybe a follow-up for Mr. Abrazinskis. Is the primary concern about this equipment the need to go through the permitting process, or is the primary concern the fee associated with the permit, or is it both?
Well, it's both. It's the fact that we'd have to do the fee is a tough rub when I can't get the money to do the rest of it, but that's personal. That's more personal than anything.
So the question for Mr. Abrazinskis, I guess, is do we know whether this equipment has been permitted in other states? Do we have sort of a template for understanding what the emissions would be and what permitting would look like and how easy that could be made?
Yes, ma'am. So I think three very important points here, and I appreciate Commissioner Yarborough bringing this up because we've had prior conversations about this on the phone, recognizing the tremendous amount of vegetative debris caused from Hurricane Helene. Our division took action last year to pursue a no action assurance letter from EPA to waive the federally required permitting for these types of devices used for temporary disaster debris management. And so we recognize that. We agree with Commissioner Yarborough. This needed to be part of the portfolio. And at that time, a permit did not need to be a hurdle for putting them into use in Western North Carolina. So we pursued that, and we have that in place today through since last fall through September 1st. So that was why September 1st came up earlier, is because that no action assurance waives that federal permitting requirement until September 1st of this year. Secondly, in the absence of that no action assurance, federal rules, the new source performance standards, apply to a unit like this with this type of capacity, but potential. And it categorically requires a Title V permit. It's not the typical what your potential to emit is, but it's categorically required, and that's a federal rule. We would like to see that not be the case, categorical requirement for Title V permits. We don't think that's necessary. We've thought that for 20 years since Keith Overcash was our director, but those are the federal rules. And so with that, and because of that, our division proactively developed a general permit for these types of units to speed this along. And those general permits cost 10% of the normal Title V permit fee. And so it's not a $12,000 application fee, it's a $1,200 application fee. And so those are the types of things we've proactively done to address some of the concerns that we share in these types of situations.
One quick follow-up to that. Is the general permit limited to emergency use, or is that an ongoing general permit?
That's for any air curtain incinerator or air curtain burner type device, that general permit applies. And we now have something called Access DEQ, or our Permit Transformation Project, in place. And it's already live for these types of general permits for our division. And so it makes it much easier for an applicant to apply. And what it results in is our staff being able to issue these general permits for this type of unit within a couple of days of receiving a complete application. And so that's the fourth thing on my list I forgot. So thank you for that follow-up question, that we've positioned ourselves to be able to turn quickly on an application for these types of units.
And that would be available without regard to the September 1st.
That's correct. That was available before the storm and is available after the no action assurance that we requested, that waives the permitting requirement in total until September 1st.
But to September 1st is my point.
Yeah. All right.
When it is an emergency till the month, that's what I'm asking for. One is be able to get a general permit or deemed permit on a lot of these permitting things. And by qualified people, I'm not talking about the general contractor or something that just comes up and asks for it. The second piece of it, it's an emergency until the money runs out. It's absurd to tell me, okay, yeah, well, you're okay till September 1. I don't even know if I'll have money. Same thing with the permitting in the river. I can't do a darn thing until I get a permit. Well, I don't have any money to do anything yet as a soil and water district. So the point being is, it's an emergency, and do it like FEMA does. It's an emergency till the money runs out. That's all I'm asking you, is come up with a way to make that happen, because it's to say, okay, you're good for 60 days. You're good till September 1st. Well, go ahead. I'm
No, I
sorry.
just want to add, because we're working on that. I think senior management's working on that at the department.
Yeah.
And some other agencies are working on it, but trying to get something where this is clean and neat and simple than it is now. Even what Mike described is great, but you got to have it down at the grassroots level where they can understand it and deal with it. And so there's a lot of other things here we're talking about, whether it's working in the rivers or whatever, that I know Bill wants to make sure that even though the governor's emergency declaration ends, that we can still treat these things, if they were permitted at the right time, for longer as we wait for the money to get here. Because if you have to generate new permits and the game changes, it's really not emergency anymore.
No, I get that question all the time. We're still working on Fred, as he said. Still don't have anything done on stabilization on many of our rivers, because it took 2 years to even get approval to say that we didn't have to have engineering to drag the debris out. The point being is, if it's a disaster, if it's declared, then it should be an emergency until the money runs out. I mean, let's face it, that's what the critical piece is. That's all I needed to say, and I appreciate your time, and I didn't mean to.
Let me follow up one quick thing on air curtain. The rules we've got at the commission tomorrow, do they have anything to do with that general permit?
No.
I'm looking at our staff.
Is it included in those rules, or not included, or not effective?
No, and really what's at play here is the federal new source performance
No, I
standard.
understand that,
But in our rule package tomorrow, it is not, no. Sir.
Okay. You still have something you want to
Well,
ask?
Unfortunately, like many citizens who have good ideas, government is an impediment, and this is yet another case of that. But I've not been privy to Chairman Solomon's discussions with the department on a single umbrella emergency permitting tool. But the other part of this, as far as when the money runs out, it's not, this goes back to Florence and Matthew,
Absolutely.
where the money still has not been spent and people still can't get back in their houses. So it's a systemic problem throughout both state and federal government. I would suggest that legislative action is probably required at some point because just the way the money flows. And there was a news story last month that all this money has been secured by the legislature, the state legislature, and it's not being spent because everybody's waiting to find out what FEMA is going to pay for.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
And this is just not a good way to serve the people of the state. I don't know, but is there a mechanism whereby
Maybe in Homeland
the
Security.
commission can issue a resolution or some such mechanism to the legislature, lining out the things we've talked about? Because I know that there are individual legislators working very hard trying to coordinate with DC on the FEMA activities about, oh, you can't build your house back where it was because you're in the floodplain, and we're remapping all the floodplains, and all the people who used to not be in the floodplain, now they're in the floodplain.
Yeah.
So there's a morass here, and I doubt that the commission has the authority to address everything. We can expedite things, and we can work with the department on permitting efficiencies and the duration of those permits, but it's going to take more than we can do.
Oh, yeah, and I understand that. I don't expect that we can solve this. I told Commissioner Smith that early on, I feel like the preachers that don't even get paid a chicken dinner. So I keep on talking. But you know, when you've been involved in disasters for so long across the state, when we do the exact same thing, every time there's a disaster, we have to go through all of this stuff, and then it's years. Is there not a way that we can say, okay, yeah, we know what we need to do. We all need to get together and make it work and not try to be in silos. That's all I'm asking. Thank you for the time.
I'll just add quickly, having had some history in the past with the coastal management program, they have long had emergency general permits that were created for hurricane response. Now, they have the benefit of not having to respond to EPA. They do have a federal agency.
That's right.
NOAA
Yeah.
is their oversight agency, but not EPA, and there's much less direct control of the regulations in that program. But that is certainly something that can work. I think it requires, in some cases, the commission, in some cases, the department to go ahead and do that work, understanding we've got to get it through that federal oversight process on the EPA side. But there's no reason we can't do it. I mean, it's a perfectly feasible thing to do. It requires some work, and it requires shepherding it through EPA for approval in those programs that are delegated. So I think that's a productive way to go. The legislature and FEMA, if they still exist, will control the money outflow. That's sort of a different issue, and it's a big problem. But in terms of permitting, there's no reason we can't do more work on general permits, whether it's air quality or water quality. And I'm sure they're already working on that, because that's been a tool we've used for a long time. It's just you've got that extra layer of federal oversight you have to build in to the process.
Okay, well, let's close this off here because we've already over time. I'm going to leave this with Chair Solomon, and also make a suggestion that you might want to have this same presentation and that slideshow tomorrow in our information session, but I'll leave that with you. That's my suggestion. It's, entirely up to you. With that, we were going to have another presentation. We just don't have time today, but I'm going to recommend, if you're particularly interested, Director Representatives slideshow here on EPA and federal air regulatory announcements, and we might pick that up in July, depending. If there's an interest and if we have time, then I don't see any reason not to do it then. But if you're interested, go ahead and take a look at it now, and probably will have changed by July anyway. So we'll leave it at that.
Yes, sir. That's exactly what I was going to say. If you actually read the words on the slide, that's about all that we know right now. So it's a little newsy, that presentation that's before you today, but I'll be glad to come back in July because I hope that we'll have a lot more information and we can kind of fill in some of the white space on what we don't know at that time. So if that's okay with you, we can do that in information in July.
Anything else you need to say today? Okay. In that respect, unless somebody's got something burning that I don't know about, I'm going to adjourn the meeting right now and, excuse me? Yeah, right.
Without a permit.
All right. And leave it to the chair of the groundwater waste management committee to let everybody know when he's going to convene here. So we stand adjourned. I'll let him do whatever he wants to do. I said 10 minutes. I probably should only said 5.